When someone has wronged you, they may try to act like nothing happened, but deep down they know. They remember the words they said, the choices they made, the trust they broke. And whether they admit it or not, your presence becomes a mirror they can't bear to look into. Because every time they see you, they are forced to face the truth they've been running from. It's not that you are trying to make them feel bad. You're not playing games. You're not plotting revenge. But your existence, unchanged, unbroken, unapologetically standing in your truth, becomes a reflection they can't stomach. People will go out of their way to avoid the one person who sees them clearly, because you are not blinded by their excuses or their justifications. You are a living reminder of who they really are. When the masks come off, the human mind is good at self-deception. We can convince ourselves we were right, we were justified, we did what we had to do. But those narratives fall apart when we stand in front of someone we betrayed. Their eyes, their silence, their calmness, it dismantles the lies we tell ourselves. That is why they avoid you. It's not because you're intimidating. It's not because you're confrontational. It's because you've become the evidence. You've become the unshakable proof that they weren't who they claimed to be. And shame, real shame, is not a loud emotion. It doesn't scream. It doesn't explode. It creeps in like a shadow and sits on their shoulders. They feel it in their stomach. They feel it in the tightness of their chest. And the worst part, they can't blame you for it, because you didn't do anything but exist. That's why sometimes the best response to being wronged is nothing. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to gather witnesses or prove your innocence. People who operate in truth don't need to prove anything. The truth has a way of showing itself without your interference. And when it does, it doesn't need your voice to be heard. It uses theirs. It turns their thoughts against them, replaying the moment they crossed the line, making them feel the weight of their actions every time they remember you. You don't have to carry that burden for them. You don't have to spend your energy trying to make them feel what they should already feel. Life, conscience, and the mirror you unknowingly hold up to them will do that work for you. There is power in simply standing tall and moving forward. The way you live after someone betrays you is the most powerful response you can give. When you don't break, when you don't shrink, when you don't dissolve into bitterness, you rob them of the satisfaction of seeing you destroyed. And more than that, you leave them with an image burned into their mind. The image of you surviving without them, becoming even stronger without their help. Every time they remember what they did, they see you. Not the version they hoped to leave broken, but the version they unintentionally helped create sharper, wiser, untouchable. That's why they can't face you anymore. You're no longer just a person to them. You're the proof of their failure to break you. And here's the part most people miss. Shame isn't about you at all. It's about them. You are not responsible for carrying it or easing it. You are not here to make them comfortable with the harm they've caused. Their inability to look you in the eye is their problem, not yours. You don't need to shrink to make them feel better. You don't need to dull your light to help them hide from what they did. Your job is to keep walking in truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Especially when it makes others uncomfortable. Because if your truth shakes them, it's not your job to soften the blow. It's their job to reconcile with themselves. People can run from you. They can block you. They can erase you from conversations and remove you from rooms. But they can't run from themselves. They can't escape the moments they replay in their head at night. And in that sense, you have already won. Not because you've punished them, but because you've refused to let their actions define you. You've refused to lower yourself to their level. You've chosen dignity over drama, self-respect over retaliation. That choice alone turns their shame into a weight they have to carry for as long as they refuse to face it. And the truth is, most people will carry that weight for years. The irony is that the very thing they try to avoid, your presence, is also the very thing that could help them heal if they were brave enough to face it. But that's not your work to do. You can't fix someone's shame. You can't make someone see themselves clearly if they aren't ready. So you let them walk away. You let them keep avoiding you. And while they're busy running from the mirror, you keep becoming everything they swore you couldn't be. That's the real silent punishment. Not because you set out to punish them, but because you chose to live free while they remain trapped inside their own guilt. You will meet people in life who can't face you anymore. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've grown into a version of yourself that makes their betrayal impossible to ignore. And when that happens, you don't chase them. You don't beg for closure. You simply keep moving forward. Because the truth is, the most powerful justice you will ever see is someone being forced to live with themselves. And the most powerful freedom you will ever feel is realizing you don't have to be part of that process. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but those who understand its true power know it can be the sharpest weapon you possess. When someone hurts you, the natural instinct is to speak out, to defend yourself, to tell your side of the story so the world knows you are in the right. But silence does something different. Silence places the weight of their actions squarely on their shoulders and leaves them with nothing to push against. It denies them the drama they crave. It denies them the distraction they can use to avoid looking at themselves. When you step back, when you choose not to fight in the mud, they are left alone with the echo of what they did. And that echo doesn't fade. It grows louder in the spaces you've left empty. The human mind hates a vacuum. When you don't give people your words, they start filling in the silence with their own thoughts, their own fears, their own guilt. You are no longer actively trying to prove your point. They start doing it for you in their own head. That's why your silence becomes haunting. Every time they see your name, every time they hear about you, every time they accidentally cross your path, the memory of their actions comes flooding back. And there is nothing to shield them from it. They can't argue with you if you don't show up to the fight. They can't twist your words if you never speak them. They can't win a battle that you've already walked away from, because the moment you step back, the battlefield becomes theirs alone, and that is a place far more dangerous than they realize. People expect you to retaliate. They expect you to yell, to curse, to throw accusations. That's predictable. That's easy for them to process, because it gives them an excuse to say you're overreacting, that you're bitter, that you're the problem. But when you don't give them that, when you stay composed, when you refuse to let their behavior drag you down to their level, you take away their escape route. They can no longer justify their actions by pointing to yours. They have to face the truth of what they've done without the comfort of painting you as the villain. And for some people, that realization is unbearable. That's why they will avoid you, block you, or act as though you never existed. They would rather erase you than stand in the presence of someone who won without ever having to fight. Silence is also a form of self-protection. Engaging with someone who has already shown you their lack of integrity only opens the door for them to hurt you again. By stepping back, you protect your peace, your energy, and your dignity. You create space to heal without the constant reopening of wounds. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to announce that you're choosing silence. You don't need to make a grand declaration that you're done speaking. You simply live your life. You redirect your energy toward the people and opportunities that deserve it. You build something new while they are still tangled in the mess they created. And the more you grow in that quiet, the louder your absence becomes in their life. It's important to remember that silence isn't about pretending nothing happened. It's about knowing exactly what happened and choosing not to waste your breath on those who aren't ready to hear it. It's about understanding that some people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for an argument. They want to bait you into a fight so they can feel justified. By refusing to engage, you are telling them without words that you are not on their level. You are operating in a different space now, one they can't reach unless they rise to meet you. And many won't. They will stay exactly where they are, spinning in circles, wondering why you no longer respond. That wondering will turn into guilt, and that guilt will turn into shame. And shame has a way of eating at people from the inside out. The most powerful part of silence is that it leaves the door open for accountability. But only if they choose to walk through it. By not engaging, you give them the opportunity to sit with their actions and decide for themselves what kind of person they want to be moving forward. You're not forcing them into an apology. You're not demanding closure. You are simply holding your ground and letting them wrestle with themselves. And whether they ever change or not, you have already won. Because silence has allowed you to walk away with your peace intact while they are left with the noise of their own conscience. People underestimate how exhausting it is to run from themselves. They will avoid you, yes, but in doing so, they are avoiding the part of themselves that they see reflected in you. the part they're ashamed of. And no matter how far they run, no matter how many distractions they pile on top of that shame, it will be there waiting for them in the quiet moments. And the irony is that your silence, the very thing they may see as indifference, is what keeps that shame alive. Every unanswered message, every avoided conversation, every time you choose to rise above, you're reinforcing the truth that they don't want to face. And eventually, that truth will break through, whether they're ready or not. When you understand this, you stop chasing explanations. You stop needing to be understood by those who have already shown you their inability to see clearly. You realize that sometimes the greatest justice isn't exposing them. It's letting them expose themselves in the silence you've created. And while they're struggling to carry the weight of their own actions, you are free to move forward, unburdened, knowing that you've chosen the higher ground and that nothing they do can touch the peace you've built. Shame is a strange thing. It doesn't shout, it doesn't announce itself, it doesn't slam doors the way anger does. Shame is quiet. It creeps in during the still moments, when there's no noise to distract the mind, when the lights are off and there's nothing left to do but think, and that's when it hits them. The weight of what they did, the memory of the choices they made, the faces they hurt. They can bury it under excuses during the day. They can mask it with laughter. They can drown it in work or in the company of others. But when they are alone, there is no escape. Shame becomes a mirror they can't look away from, and your absence is the frame that holds it in place. It's the quiet reminder of the damage they caused, and it follows them everywhere they go. The thing about shame is that it's not always visible to the outside world. From the outside, they might look fine. They might act as though they've moved on, as though nothing touches them. But shame doesn't need to be seen to be real. It eats from the inside. It changes the way they speak, the way they stand, the way they interact with others. They might avoid certain topics, certain people, even certain places because the memory of their actions is tied to them. And you become one of those triggers. They can't meet your eyes without feeling the sting of what they did. They can't hear your name without feeling the heaviness of knowing they can't undo the past. That's why they keep their distance. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're a living reminder of the truth. They can't handle. Shame is also relentless. You can try to ignore it, but it has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. A song, a smell, a random sentence in a conversation can bring it all rushing back. And because they never faced it, never owned it, never made amends, it festers. It's like a wound they refuse to clean. On the surface it might seem healed, but deep down infection spreads. That's why people often overcompensate when they're ashamed. They might act overly cheerful around others. They might brag about their life. They might post pictures showing how happy they are. But underneath it all is that gnawing voice that won't shut up. That whisper that says, you know what you did. And every time they put on that fake smile, it costs them a little more energy. Over time, the performance wears them down. What makes shame so powerful is that no one can take it from you. Not even the person you wronged. You could forgive them. You could tell them it's over, that you've moved on. But if they haven't forgiven themselves, the shame remains. That's the part they can't escape. And that's why your presence, or even your silence, is so unsettling to them. They might think if they avoid you long enough, they'll be free of it. But shame doesn't work that way. You can avoid people, but you can't avoid yourself. You can move to a new city, start a new job, meet new friends, but eventually you still have to be alone with your thoughts. And when that moment comes, shame will be there sitting in the corner, waiting patiently. Shame also changes relationships in ways people don't expect. They might start pulling away from others, afraid that the truth of what they did will somehow leak out. They become guarded, careful with their words, worried about slipping up. They might even turn defensive, ready to attack if someone gets too close to the truth. And yet no one is attacking them, except themselves. That's the part they don't realize. They are their own punishment. Their own silence when the guilt is too much to speak. Their own insomnia when the memories won't stop replaying. Their own tension when they feel eyes on them. And it's all because shame has rooted itself deep inside. And nothing they do can fully erase it until they face it head on. There's another part of shame that people underestimate. It lingers even in the face of denial. They can try to convince themselves that what they did was justified, that it wasn't that bad, that they had no choice. And maybe they can sell that lie to others for a while. But the human conscience is stubborn. You can bury the truth, but it leaks out in ways you can't control. It shows in the way they avoid certain memories. It shows in the way they tense up at certain names. It shows in the way they shift the conversation when certain topics come up. They might not even realize how obvious it is to others, but shame has a way of revealing itself without a word being spoken in time. Shame becomes isolating. At first, they might avoid only you. Then they start avoiding anyone who reminds them of you. Then they avoid situations where they might have to confront the reality of their actions. Slowly, their world gets smaller. The circle of people they feel safe around shrinks. And even in that smaller world, the shame doesn't fade. It becomes louder because there's less noise to cover it. And that's why some people can't face you anymore. It's not that you've done anything to them now. It's that you were part of a chapter they've tried to rip out of their own story. But no matter how hard they try, the imprint is still there. This is why you don't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to make them feel bad, because they already do, even if they never admit it out loud. Shame is their silent punishment, and it's one that no one can take from them until they decide to confront it. You get to move forward with your life, carrying lessons instead of baggage, while they remain stuck in the place where their actions trap them. And the longer they avoid it, the heavier it becomes, until even looking at you feels like staring directly into the consequences they've been running from all along. There's a certain kind of strength in saying nothing, in refusing to engage, in letting the silence do the talking. When someone has wronged you and you choose not to chase, not to beg, not to plead your case, you strip away the easy escape they were hoping for. See, arguments give people an excuse to shift the blame, to point fingers, to twist the narrative until they feel like the victim. But when you give them nothing, no words to fight against, no reaction to feed off of, they're left alone with their own actions. And in that quiet, there's no one left to blame but themselves. That's where shame grows the fastest. It's not in the heated moments where emotions run high. It's in the stillness that follows, when the dust settles, and all that's left is the truth they've been trying to avoid. People often think that silence is weakness, that it's a sign you've surrendered, but they couldn't be more wrong. Silence is a choice. It's control. It's the refusal to give them the comfort of your energy. You're not shutting down because you can't handle the confrontation. You're choosing not to because you know it's not worth your time. And that unsettles them. They expected you to react, to break down, to give them something they could twist into their favor. When you don't, you take away their defense mechanism. You leave them standing there holding the weight of what they've done, with no distractions to hide behind. That's when shame starts to feel heavy, because now it's just them and their choices. Silence also has a way of magnifying the truth. Words can sometimes blur reality, dressing it up, making it easier to digest. But when you take words away, people are forced to face raw, unfiltered consequences. They notice the absence. They feel the distance. They realize that the connection they once had with you is gone. Not because you slammed the door, but because they broke it and never fixed it. And the worst part for them is knowing they can't force it open again. They can't demand your attention. They can't make you explain yourself. They can't make you relive the pain just to make themselves feel better. Your silence becomes a wall they can't climb, a boundary they can't cross, and deep down, they know why it's there. The more time passes, the more that silence becomes a reminder they can't escape. Every time they think of you, they're reminded that you didn't need to scream. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to prove your point. You simply walked away. And that is a statement in itself. It tells them that you value your peace more than you value their approval. It tells them that you refuse to be pulled into the chaos they live in. And it tells them, most of all, that their actions were enough to lose you entirely. That realization stings more than any insult ever could, because it's permanent. Words can fade, but the memory of someone removing themselves from your life because of your behavior that stays. Silence doesn't just punish, it exposes. When someone is left alone without your voice to drown out their conscience, the truth they've been avoiding starts to surface. They replay moments in their head. They remember the things they said, the things they did, the times they should have acted differently. And because you're no longer there to talk it through, to give them closure, they're left to deal with it on their own. That's where the real punishment lies. It's not in anything you do to them, it's in what they end up doing to themselves when they realize they've lost something they can't get back. Your silence forces them to face the version of themselves they'd rather ignore. And the longer they avoid it, the more it eats away at them. Some people will pretend your silence doesn't matter. They'll act like they're fine, like they've moved on, like they're unaffected. But pay attention. Those who truly don't care don't need to prove they don't care. The ones who put on a show, who try too hard to appear unaffected, are often the ones feeling it the most. Because silence isn't something you can block out. It's not a message you can delete. It's not a phone call you can hang up on. It's constant. It's there every time they think of you and realize there's no way back in. And for someone who once had access to your time, your energy, and your heart, that absence is a void they can't fill with anything else. In a way, silence is the cleanest form of justice. You don't have to drag anyone's name through the mud. You don't have to engage in petty games. You simply remove yourself and let the truth do its work. And the truth always works, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but it works. Eventually, they'll understand that the silence wasn't about punishing them out of spite. It was about protecting yourself from their chaos. It was about choosing peace over pain. And in that understanding comes the shame, because they'll know they could have kept you in their life, if only they had acted differently. But now it's too late, and that's something they'll have to carry alone. The beauty of using silence is that it keeps you free. You're not bound to the cycle of reaction and retaliation. You're not stuck in endless debates trying to get someone to see your side. You step away, and in doing so, you take back your power. They can't manipulate what they can't reach. They can't twist words that were never spoken. They can't fight with someone who isn't fighting back. And in the end, the shame they feel is theirs alone. It doesn't touch you. You walk away lighter, while they stay exactly where they are, wrestling with the truth that silence made impossible to ignore. When someone realizes they can no longer reach you, it's not just about the physical absence. It's the emotional lockout that cuts the deepest. You've closed a door, and not only have you closed it, you've built an entire wall around it. You've removed their access to the most valuable thing they once had, your presence. And the more they try to find a way back, the more they come face to face with the reality that nothing they do can undo what's been done. They can't charm their way back in. They can't guilt you into opening that door. They can't manipulate you into revisiting the pain they caused. You've taken away their power. And for someone who once held it over you, that's a bitter pill to swallow. People underestimate the weight of being shut out. At first, they might think they can brush it off. They'll tell themselves they never needed you, that it doesn't matter, that they're better off without you. But time is the great revealer. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence grows heavier. There's no message from you to break the monotony, no updates about your life, no glimpse into the world they used to be part of. That absence becomes its own reminder, a constant whisper that says, you are no longer welcome here. And the more they feel it, the harder it is to ignore. They start to realize that your absence isn't temporary, it's permanent, and it's because of their own actions. This is why the inability to access you becomes such a powerful form of shame, because access means influence. If they could reach you, they could explain themselves. They could twist the story, they could try to regain control. But when you've cut that line, they have nothing to work with. They're stuck on the outside, watching you live your life without them, knowing they have no say in it. They see you smiling without their presence, succeeding without their help, growing without their input. And that burns, because it forces them to confront the truth. They weren't as necessary to your happiness as they believed. You were never dependent on them. You just allowed them into your world. And now that privilege is gone, the loss of access also strips away the illusion of connection. Maybe they told themselves they were important to you, that no matter what happened you'd always be there. But when you walk away and stay away, you destroy that illusion. You prove that your loyalty has limits, and that those limits are tied to self-respect. They can no longer comfort themselves with the idea that you're still there in the background, waiting to forgive. Instead, they're left with the image of you moving forward, unbothered, while they remain stuck replaying the moments they should have acted differently. That contrast, your progress against their stagnation, is its own form of punishment, and they know it. There's also a deeper layer to losing access to someone who truly valued you. They lose not just the person, but the safe space you provided. Your presence may have been a place where they could be vulnerable, understood, and accepted despite their flaws. But when their actions destroyed that, they didn't just lose your attention. They lost the version of themselves they could be around you. And without that safe space, they're left to face themselves in harsher environments where there's no compassion to soften the blow. That's when the shame intensifies, because they realize they didn't just lose you, they lost the best parts of themselves that only existed in your presence. What really makes this punishment so effective is that it doesn't require you to lift a finger. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to explain yourself over and over. You simply remove access and time does the rest. Every day that passes reinforces the distance. Every attempt they make to reach you that goes unanswered deepens the wound. And over time, they start to understand that there's no shortcut back in. No magic apology, no grand gesture will undo what they've done, because your decision wasn't made out of impulse. It was made out of clarity. You saw the truth, you understood what needed to be done, and you acted on it. That kind of resolve can't be swayed by desperation. The irony is that some people only value access once it's taken away. They might have taken your time, energy, and kindness for granted when they had them. They might have believed you'd always be available no matter how they treated you. But losing access flips the script. It forces them to see the privilege they abused. And that's where the silent punishment cuts the deepest. It's not just about what they've lost. It's about the realization that they had it and didn't appreciate it until it was gone. That knowledge is heavy. It lingers. It doesn't fade with time. It grows stronger with every reminder that they can't undo the damage. The absence of access also robs them of closure. They don't get the final conversation, the tidy ending, the reassurance that you don't hate them. They're left in uncertainty, and uncertainty is a breeding ground for shame. They fill in the blanks with their own guilt, their own doubts, their own fears about how you see them now. And because they can't confirm or deny those thoughts, they live in that mental loop, replaying every mistake and wondering how it looks from your perspective. That mental prison is more effective than anything you could say or do to them, because it's built from their own mind, their own regrets, and their own awareness of what they lost in the end. Removing access is about more than creating distance. It's about protecting your peace and ensuring that your life remains free of the chaos they brought. But for them, it's a punishment they carry long after the last word was spoken. They see your silence as a mirror, reflecting back every reason. They're no longer part of your world. And the longer they stand on the outside looking in, the heavier that mirror becomes, until they can no longer avoid the truth staring back at them. There comes a point where silence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. When you stop chasing someone, stop explaining, stop arguing, you send a message that words could never fully capture. You no longer care to be understood by them. And that shift is powerful because it's not born out of spite, but out of a deep understanding of your own worth. You realize that your time, your energy, and your peace are far too valuable to be wasted trying to prove a point to someone who was never really listening in the first place. So you stop, and in that stillness you reclaim control, not over them, but over yourself. When someone is used to you fighting for the relationship, whether it's friendship, family, or something romantic, your silence becomes unsettling. They expect your rebuttals, your clarifications, your long messages trying to make things right. That's the pattern they've relied on, and in some way taken comfort in. But when you break that pattern, when you choose not to respond, it creates a void they don't know how to handle. You're no longer feeding the cycle that kept them in control. You're no longer participating in the emotional tug-of-war that gave them a sense of power. Instead, you've walked away from the game entirely, and now they're left pulling on a rope with no one on the other end. The most disarming thing you can do to someone who thrives on drama is to give them nothing. No reaction, no validation, no sign that they still have the ability to get under your skin. Because people who manipulate or provoke you are often feeding off the energy you give in return. Anger fuels them. Defensiveness gives them leverage. Even your hurt can become a weapon in their hands. But when you remove all of that, when you become emotionally unavailable to their chaos, they have nothing left to work with. And that absence of reaction becomes a mirror they can't avoid. They're forced to sit with themselves, with no distraction, no emotional bait to keep them from facing the truth of their own behavior. It's not just that silence denies them control. It also forces them to wonder. Humans hate uncertainty, and when they don't know what you're thinking, it drives them crazy. They may start overanalyzing, replaying every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out what pushed you to this point. And in doing so, they end up confronting parts of themselves they would have otherwise ignored. They start to question whether they were wrong, whether they went too far, whether they misjudged you. That uncertainty is its own form of discomfort, and the longer you remain silent, the deeper it digs into their mind. They can't defend themselves against a conversation that never happens, so instead, they're left battling their own thoughts. Choosing silence isn't about weakness. It's about discipline. It takes far more strength to hold your tongue than to lash out. It's easy to react in the heat of the moment, to fire back with words meant to wound. But restraint is power. When you withhold your reaction, you prove to yourself that you are not controlled by their actions or words. You show that you can operate from a place of self-control rather than emotional impulse. That discipline doesn't just protect your peace in the moment. It builds resilience for the future. You learn that you don't need to respond to every provocation, and in doing so, you become harder to manipulate, harder to shake, harder to break. Silence also strips away the illusion of importance they may have in your life. As long as you're responding, even negatively, they know they still occupy space in your mind. They know they still have influence. But the moment you stop giving them that, they start to fade into irrelevance. They're no longer the center of your emotional world, and that realization stings. They can no longer comfort themselves with the idea that they still matter to you in some significant way. Instead, they have to face the truth. You've moved on with or without them, and your life doesn't revolve around their presence or absence, and for you, silence becomes a shield. It protects you from being dragged back into cycles that drained you. It keeps you from wasting energy on someone who's proven they don't deserve it. It gives you the space to heal, to think clearly, to move forward without the noise of their opinions in your ear. In that quiet, you can rebuild yourself without interference, without the constant push and pull that kept you off balance. You can focus on the people and things that actually add value to your life, rather than being consumed by someone who only took from it. Over time, they will realize that your silence wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A choice to preserve your dignity, your sanity, and your energy. And that knowledge will hit harder than anything you could have said. Because silence is not the absence of communication. It's a form of communication in itself. It says, I see what you've done. I understand what you are, and I choose not to engage with it anymore. It's final, in a way words could never be. And once they understand that, they'll know they've lost the most valuable thing they once had. Your willingness to let them into your world. There is a kind of punishment that doesn't require you to lift a finger, raise your voice, or even make your presence known. It's the kind that unfolds quietly, invisibly, and yet it leaves a mark deeper than any loud confrontation ever could. When you choose to live well, to grow, to rise above the games and the damage someone tried to leave you with, you are giving them the one consequence they never saw coming. They expect you to be bitter, to be stuck, to be chained to the past they created for you. They expect your life to become smaller, dimmer, less vibrant because of what they did. But when they look up and see you thriving, building, smiling, and moving forward without them, it shakes something inside them. It shows them they failed in the most profound way possible. They couldn't break you. This is not about pretending to be okay just to make a point. This is about genuinely rebuilding your life in a way that makes you unshakable. You stop carrying their shadow with you. You stop replaying the moments that hurt you. You stop letting their voice echo in your head when you make decisions. Instead, you channel all that energy into something constructive. Your work, your passions, your health, your relationships with people who deserve you. Your life becomes proof that you are not defined by what happened to you, but by what you choose to do next. And when the people who wronged you realize they no longer have a starring role in your story, it forces them to confront the fact that they've lost all influence over you. For someone who tried to control you, diminish you, or break you, seeing you succeed without them is like holding up a mirror to their own failure. They may never admit it out loud, but they feel it. They know they once had the opportunity to be part of your life and they ruined it. They know they had access to you, your loyalty, your kindness, and your time, and they wasted it. And now that you've taken all of that away, they see the value of what they lost in a way they never could when they had it. That realization is their silent punishment. It lingers in the back of their mind, gnawing at them because it's not something they can undo. No apology, no excuse, no sudden change of heart can erase the fact that they've been written out of your future living. Well, isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. You remind yourself that you are capable, that you can rebuild, that you can take the pieces of what they tried to destroy and create something stronger than before. You realize that your happiness is not dependent on them, on their validation, or on them finally understanding your worth. It comes from within, from the daily choices you make to protect your peace and invest in your growth. And that kind of happiness is unshakable because it's not built on anything they can touch. They can't ruin it because they no longer have access to it. And there's another layer to this silent punishment. It's not instant. It doesn't hit them all at once. It creeps up over time. Maybe at first they don't notice. Maybe they're too wrapped up in their own life to see what's happening. But eventually they hear about you. They see a photo. They get a glimpse of the life you're building, and it lands differently than they expected. They don't see someone broken or defeated. They see someone who's standing taller, smiling brighter, and doing better than before. And that realization doesn't just pass. It sticks. It resurfaces when they least expect it, in moments of quiet, in the spaces where they're forced to sit with their own choices. The beauty of this kind of silent consequence is that it requires nothing from you except to keep living well. You don't need to check if they've noticed. You don't need to drop hints. You don't need to make a performance out of it. You simply keep going, and your life naturally becomes the evidence they can't avoid. Even if they try to ignore it, the truth has a way of finding them. And when it does, it's not just a reminder of you. It's a reminder of the person they could have been, but chose not to be. It's a reminder of what they let slip away, not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't capable of valuing you. And here's the part they can't escape: the better you do, the more their past behavior becomes undeniable. Your success makes their actions stand out in sharper contrast. The more at peace you are, the more obvious it becomes that they were the source of chaos. The more you thrive, the more their choices look like the mistakes they were. And no matter how much time passes, they will carry that knowledge with them. They can't undo it, and they can't rewrite the story to make themselves the hero. You took that power away the moment you decided to move on and build something better for yourself. In the end, your best revenge is not revenge at all. It's freedom. It's living in a way that makes their memory irrelevant. It's waking up every day knowing you don't need them, don't think about them, and don't wish for them back. It's building a life that is so full, so rich, so aligned with who you are, that their absence doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like the space you needed to grow. And while you may never see their reaction, you can be certain of one thing: they see you, they know. And that knowing is the punishment they'll carry quietly, long after you've stopped thinking about them at all. There is a strength in silence that most people will never understand until they experience it. Silence is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is control. It is the ability to stand in the middle of chaos, accusations, and provocation, and choose not to give someone the satisfaction of a reaction. When you withhold your words, you force people to sit with theirs. You create a space where they can hear the echo of their own actions without you interrupting it. And for someone who feeds off your attention, your energy, or your emotional response, that silence becomes unbearable. It's like holding up a mirror they can't look away from, but this time you're not in the reflection. They are, and all they see is themselves. When you go silent, you remove their ability to twist your words. You take away the ammunition they could use against you. You make it impossible for them to manipulate the conversation because there is no conversation. Silence keeps you in control of the narrative. It allows you to respond with action instead of reaction. It buys you time to think, to plan, to see things clearly before you make your next move. And that pause, those moments where you say nothing, often speak louder than any speech you could give. Because in that silence you are telling them, you no longer have access to me. You no longer get to pull me into your chaos. And that message, though unspoken, hits harder than any argument ever could. Silence also exposes people. When you refuse to defend yourself to someone who has already made up their mind about you, you strip away the illusion that the discussion is fair or balanced. You stop playing a game you were never going to win. And once you step out of that game, they are left to argue with themselves. They're left trying to justify their behavior without your presence there to give them a target. That's when the truth becomes harder for them to ignore. They may try to provoke you again, try to drag you back into the cycle, but every time you stay quiet, it becomes clear that they are the only one still playing. There's another layer to the power of silence. It shifts the weight of accountability. When you stop explaining, stop pleading, stop engaging, they are forced to carry the full weight of what they've done without the distraction of your reaction. Many people survive on deflection. They need you to respond so they can make the conversation about your reaction instead of their action. But when you give them nothing, they can't deflect. They're left with the raw reality of what they've done. And whether they admit it or not, that reality is heavy. It lingers in their mind in ways your words never could. Because words can be debated, dismissed, or twisted, but silence just sits there, undeniable, unmovable. It's also worth noting that silence is not the same as avoidance. Avoidance comes from fear, silence comes from strength. Avoidance is running away from the problem. Silence is standing in front of it and saying, "This is not worth my breath." It's not about pretending something didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it pull you down to a level where you lose your dignity. And when you hold that kind of composure, people notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. They recognize that you are no longer playing by the same rules, and it unsettles them. They can't predict you, and unpredictability makes them uncomfortable. The most powerful thing about silence is that it's not just for them. It's for you. It protects your energy. It keeps you from saying things you'll regret in moments of anger. It allows you to process what happened on your own terms, instead of being forced into a rushed confrontation. It gives you space to heal without their voice constantly in your ear. And over time, you realize that silence is not just a tactic, it's a lifestyle choice. It's the decision to engage only with what adds value to your life, and to walk away from what doesn't without needing to announce it to the world. And then comes the moment they realize they've lost your attention. That's when the silence becomes their problem, not yours. They start to wonder why you're not responding. They replay their actions, looking for the moment you decided to shut the door. They may even reach out, trying to pull you back in, but you no longer feel the pull. You've moved past the point of needing them to understand, needing them to apologize, needing them to see your side. And that is when silence becomes your victory. It's not about them hearing you. It's about you no longer needing to be heard by them. In time, silence becomes second nature. You stop giving explanations to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop arguing with people who only listen to respond, not to understand. You stop wasting your breath trying to change minds that are closed. Instead, you redirect that energy into building, into living, into surrounding yourself with people who don't require you to fight for basic respect. And as you do, you realize that silence was never about punishing them. It was about freeing you from the exhausting cycle of defending yourself to the wrong people. Freeing you from the noise that kept you from hearing your own thoughts. Freeing you from the belief that closure has to come from them, when in reality, it comes from you, and maybe they never admit it. Maybe they never tell you that your silence affected them, but you can be sure it did. Because silence has a way of echoing in the spaces words can't reach. It forces people to listen to themselves, and not everyone likes what they hear. But by the time they realize it, you're already gone. Mentally, emotionally, and maybe even physically. And that's the most powerful thing you can do. Not scream, not argue, not beg. Just go quiet, keep moving, and let your absence speak louder than you ever could.